Come on, Evelyn. Keep moving. We gotta find Core and get the hell out of here. The cries of Alice's panting demands smashed against Evelyn's brain as the two of them ascended a blown-up hillside. I know, it's just... My face, it hurts. It hurts. Returned the long, sharp-tailed Spark with a stumbling fall to her knees. Hearing this and turning around with a panicking gasp, Atlas reached downwards with his hands and hoisted Evelyn back to her feet. I understand, but we cannot rest now. We gotta keep moving, expressed the four-legged Spark before taking his love by the hand and looking out over the burning community of Salvaheim. Do you think Core will be at the school? Evelyn asked as both her and Atlas began to quickly sprint through the fog. Static fire burned within the sky above, while monsters continued to fly down and attack all those who were still fighting below. The screams and cries of Sparks bellowed like banshees within the night, terrified, angry, and confused to all that had been happening. He was teaching there earlier today. He has to be. Atlas assumed with a sweating brow, while the both of them rounded a corner, only to encounter a polychrome. Scrap! Shouted Atlas as he quickly deployed his double-bladed katana and sliced the monster's head clean off. A spray of colors mixed with that of green electricity buzzed to life, whilst the tall, slender, multicolored beast crumbled upon itself. Be alert! Stayed Evelyn, while she deployed two arm blades as well as the dagger-like end of her tail. Now running side by side, the couple slashed and clashed their way through several glitches, the majority of them being the smaller stable types, while occasionally meeting with both polychromes and sourclaws. But the two Sparks were experienced, trained well, but couldn't shake the horrors and questions that were stabbing at their minds. I've never seen anything like these things. Never in our studies, in training, or the stories we heard. Evelyn began, shaking her head while holding back tears to the utter carnage that laid waste to their feet. They just keep coming. Pymatira, they just keep coming! Atlas returned as he gazed upon the crack in the sky, watching as more of the beasts either dropped below or flew to the ashy skies. The school is just up there. Once we find him, we regroup with the others. Atlas continued as the shape of a building made its presence known just up ahead, however, being completely lit aflame. Oh no! Both Evelyn and Atlas gasped out as they ran up and hurtled a metal-gated fence to its outer sector. The entire building was crumbling down. Buses lay thrown aside. The plants and trees were all but ash. The worst of all was the silence. No screams, no pleas, just the haunting silence of fire crackling into the night sky. Car! Atlas shouted aloud as he rushed towards the burning flame. Anyone! Evelyn chimed in, for it was a school, a large one at that. There could have still been survivors. Car! Atlas shouted again as he neared the flames. With both hands cupped to his mouth, the large Spark shouted again and again. Doing the same, Evelyn bellowed out her friend's name, and for those unseen. The school that once had been so grand held kindergartners to high school seniors. It was truly a community center at heart, but to see it in such a horrific state truly sent ripples of strain that coursed into the souls of both the Sparks. However, it was then a shape began to emerge from within the building's glass door entrance. Bursting through these doors came the spiraling head of an unstable glitch, crashing hard and rolling past both Evelyn and Atlas. In response, the two of them both leapt back in shock before resetting their sights upon the school, primarily upon the now bashed open doors. There, running out of the flames, stumbling with something in his arms, came the one they had been searching for, Core Novison. Nearly tripping down a set of steps upon the front door's entrance, Core escaped the flames, coughing and wheezing as well, before finally sliding upon his sparking, damaged knees, all the while still gripping hard upon something large to his chest. Core! Both Atlas and Evelyn shouted, now approaching their friend, who looked to be in a world of hurt. Core looked almost identical to his little brother. Round head, 6 spherical horns to his upper skull and lower cheeks, while having a boxy bill and robotic hosed arms. However, the differences were still there. Instead of having light blue skin, Kor's was that of a dark grayish brown or coal shaded color. His horns were also that of an almost dark redwood bark hue, ones that you would see upon the glow of a firewood. The crest on his chest was that of orange and grays, while his limbs were that of an almost gold shade. He had long black pants donned with orange boots that were all collectively sparking and smoking, charred and burnt. But Kor wasn't worried about himself. Rather, it was who was in his arms. "Back away!" Kor cried out as he gently wrested the one who had been in his arms forward a tad and into the light. To both Atlas and Evelyn's shock and dismay, it was a little girl, coughing and wheezing with glossed-over eyes, continuously repeating the words, I can't see. I can't see," in an almost state of shock. Kid, look at me. It's Mr. Novason. You're gonna be alright." Kor worriedly gasped out as he brushed the young girl's head, however, feeling the life in her soul fade at a rapid pace. "Come on, kid. Breathe! Breathe!" Kor exclaimed as he rocked the spark within his arms. She couldn't have been any older than Kor's little brother, 10 or 9 at most, but she looked to almost now be entering a state of calmness. There was no fear in her eyes, just a blank look that caused Atlas to look away in dismay, and Evelyn to finally start to cry. I can see," were the last words the girl gave out before going limp in Kor's arms, succumbing to the flames and gas poisoning from the smoke. No! Kor cried out as he shook the child and then brushed her head again. Cassie, stay with us!" Novason continued to shout, now screaming the girl's name, all before Atlas came over and placed his hand upon Kor's shoulder. "Kor," he said, making the distraught Spark look up with a face of anguish. You did all you could, but we have to go." Gently laying the girl down in the grass, and then smacking Atlas's hand off his shoulder, Kor stood up to his feet with a tense stare, before shouting back in a harsh tone. No! There's still people trapped in the building. I gotta help them!" Kor boasted before he turned and prepared to rush back into the school. "Kor!" Atlas shouted again, reaching out and grabbing a hold of his friend's arm. "There's no time!" Grunting, Novason glared harshly upon Atlas, all while the flames grew to become bigger and bigger from behind. "There's still kids in there! Let me go!" The older Novason brother boasted before shaking Atlas off and turning back and running towards the building. "Kor, wait!" Evelyn cried out as the spark neared the large doors, only for not just him, but the three of them to be blown back from a massive explosion that sent the building crumbling down. All yelling and crashing hard to the school's front, Kor, Atlas, and Evelyn all smashed and bounced off one another before landing side by side upon their backs and stomachs. The school, what was left of it, now crumbled and dismantled itself upon all angles, being reduced to a few walls and pillars, but mostly just a giant flame that ignited the surrounding area ablaze. "Atlas! Kor! Are you both alright?" Evelyn asked as she slowly got up upon her hands and knees, whilst using her tail to help Atlas up as well. Kor, however, in a pained groan, pressed both of his hands down upon the ground and weakly pushed himself up. The flames of the once mighty school looked to reflect off his eyes as he stared on with a massive pit in his stomach. All those lives, everyone who was trapped, were all now surely gone, the majority of which being those no older than his little brother. Before Kor could cry out, punch the ground, or release any sense of rage as to what had happened, he, along with Atlas and Evelyn, all caught wind of something tall maneuvering forward through the flames, audibly cackling in a cold and spine-chilling tone. What started off as a blur of darkness slowly evolved into that of an unusual shape. It was the form of a figure with severed floating limbs, all glinting off the flames that surrounded its form. The being also held the peculiar shape of a boxy or cubed head, pointed at a corner-facing angle. It was then the figure appeared from the flames in full, taking slow and mindful steps. Blood red and space black reflective limbs, sharp dagger-like feet, skeletal arms, and sharp-clawed hands with one all-seeing eye was what the trio could make out, before the cubed-headed figure stopped and examined the three of them before his form. If there was one way to describe this monster, it was as though his presence brought forth a chill. But that cold wasn't of the weather. It was of death approaching. "We gotta go! We gotta go!" Atlas shouted in fear, now getting the trio to stand upon their feet. Cor, however, stared on with hatred towards the figure, knowing for a fact that this was the one who had to be in charge of the whole nightmare. Its eye gave off the impression of thought, like it knew what it was doing and who it had targeted. Contorting his arm into an almost rifle-like blaster, Cor took aim at the beast's cubed head with tears streaming down his face. As he attempted to fire, he was quickly taken hold by Evelyn's tail and yanked towards her and Atlas. "Cor, don't be stupid! We gotta run!" she shouted, leaving the older Novosson brother to stumble and look back, watching as the cube-headed monster chuckled at their fleeing forms. "Come on, man!" Atlas screamed out again, while shaking Cor by his shoulders. Although the spark wanted nothing more than to tear the monster apart, he knew that would most certainly mean death. He didn't stand a chance. He had to move. Squeezing his eyes shut and scoffing out an anchored grunt, Cor turned away from the devil and pushed both Atlas and Evelyn forward on their feet, sending the three of them sprinting, hurdling the fence, and rushing back into the fog, all while the Glitch King, Lotus, calmly gazed upon their retreating forms. Sprinting hard, the three survivors remained headstrong and determined to get out of the nightmare they had found themselves within. Cor, however, needed to ask and know. "My family, do you know if they're okay?" questioned the orange-crested Spark, who shot out a few rounds of plasma blast towards distant glitches. "They made their way to a reality transport. Your parents and brothers should be okay," Evelyn answered while swinging her tail around and slicing a stable glitch in half. "They asked us to find you. Our plan is to regroup once we escape. Another rift station should be up ahead." Atlas chimed into the fray as he spun and threw his katana towards a nearing Sourclaw, slicing the monster in two before summoning his blade back with an electrical retraction. Hanging his head low, Cor gasped out a firm, "Thank Matira," but soon found himself in a low mental state, filled with regret and anger, knowing he could be doing more at this moment in time, but instead found himself running like a coward. "I keep seeing it. One moment everything was fine. The kids and staff were okay. Then the lockdown. Then those things!" Cor shouted as he rushed to the front of the group and deployed a set of burning orange Nova blades from the roofs of his hands. With a rage that would make most elite fighters shiver, Cor began to slice and slash his way through the small glitches, ripping them apart, stabbing, and then knocking them aside, feeling nothing but hatred for the creatures that were destroying his once beautiful home. "These animals! These beasts!" The Spark bellowed in dismay while continuing his onslaught. "Why are you here? Why?" He continued to shout before clearing the path all on his own with a Nova Rune blast, leaving nothing but destruction in his path all the same. "Why?" He now whimpered as the three made their way to a visibly destroyed and dismantled rift station. Atlas weakly groaned as they all stared upon the damage, while the distant sounds of approaching glitches could be heard from behind. Glancing from the shattered machines and then to his side, Cor caught the sight of what could be their ticket out there. A station ship designed for multiversal travel called a Star Slasher. The Star Slasher was a rugged shape, with sharp edges that looked almost akin to a polygonal sphere. A glass window sat stationed for pilots and passengers, while a locked-in flight mechanism appeared to be functional from its view. Although on its side on the ground, The machine seemed to be in working condition. "There!" Core shouted, getting the two's attention. Without wasting time, the three rushed to the large transport vessel and cracked open the entrance hatch with a firm and combined tug. Core with his hands, Evelyn with her tail, as well as Atlas with his two front sharp claws. With a loud click shifting upwards and folding upright, a small flight of stairs extended down with an entrance above, allowing for the trio to quickly clamber inside. "Come on, come on, come on, come on!" Evelyn cried as both her and Atlas ran inside, and then straight for the control deck, leaving Core to slam the door shut behind himself as the outlines of Glitched made their forms known. "Core, we need you up here now!" Atlas continued to shout, getting Novuson's attention in full. Up front, there were 3 piloting seats, 2 of which now held Atlas and Evelyn, but the middle of which still needed a pilot. Huffing without a break, Core ran his way towards the open seat and promptly got within its form. Gazing down at the control deck, the sparks began to rapidly flick between switches and pull levers in hopes of getting the ship to move. As they did, a Hellhawk glitch slammed itself into the thick glass window of the Star Slasher, scaring the daylights out of the 3 within. "Ready yourselves," Core then boasted as he pulled one last lever, and finally ignited the Slasher to life. Taking hold of a set of handles and pressing upon their forms, the ship began to rise and spark to life, all while a swarm of Hellhawks were now batting and biting to get inside. From out of the ship's form emerged large, metal, levitating rings that began to spin with a burning blue velocity, going around and around until creating the shape of an almost blurring form of fire. The Hellhawks that had been around the ship were quickly shredded to dust upon the sudden speed of the rings, which allowed the trio to fly higher and higher to the sky, until ultimately blasting off, leaving a horde of glitches to screech upon them from below. Rising quickly into the sky, Core, Atlas, and Evelyn all couldn't help but look down to the world of Salvaheim, seeing nothing but flames and carnage. The monsters continued to attack the community, leaving nothing but death and sorrow in their wake. Their once beautiful refuge was now a war zone. It was then the trio took notice of another sight. Looking forward towards the right, they could see what appeared to be a large, white glowing form beginning to crack within the ground, right below the static crack in the sky. It was horrible. Oh, so horrible, they thought, as the hole got larger and larger, shimmering with that blinding white light. Looking away, Core set his sights upon a transport key upon the control pad. It didn't matter where they went, just as long as it was anywhere but there. Reaching out and clicking upon its form, the rings around the ship began to rapidly spin and electrify with spark-like energy, until within the blink of an eye, they escaped with a flash. Re-emerging into the in-betweens of realities and worlds, the Star Slasher slowed its energies and began to simply drift between the waves of blue and purple hazes of multicolored rays of light. Sighing with relief, both Atlas and Evelyn slumped into their seats, breathing heavily from their adrenaline rush they both shared. It was then they got out and embraced one another amidst it all. Core, however, slowly stood from his seat and began to trek his way towards the back of the ship, walking with audibly heavy steps. "Core?" Atlas asked as he turned and watched his best friend approach and then stand near the back of the vessel. Looking out another window from behind, Core watched as their transport portal to Salvaheim closed in a star shape, each triangle snapping in one after the other until nothing but swirls of life remained. With a shaken posture, the coal-skinned Spark leaned his arm up and rested it against the glass. Core didn't feel a sense of pride or relief in the fact he had made it out. He felt terrible, cowardly, forced, and so many other emotions all at once. Why him? He asked inside. Why not anyone else other than him? "I should have stayed. I could have saved more. I could have done more," Core weakly said to himself as he gazed out upon the stars. "I could have done so much more." He continued, feeling his legs buckle at the sudden surge of survivor's guilt. "Matira, damn it! Why? Why?" he shouted with an accompanied punch to the glass. "Why?" Slowly approaching, both Atlas and Evelyn wanted to comfort their friend, but Core seemed to almost ignore them. He simply stood back in the ship's corner and slumped to the ground, knees up and hands in his head. Atlas and Evelyn had never seen him so hurt. "Core, is there?" Evelyn asked, reaching a hand out. "Stop! Don't. Just leave me be for a few." The Spark quickly barked with his head hanging low. "Just give me a moment." Gently nodding their heads, both Atlas and Evelyn went back to the control deck to man the ship. But before they did so, Atlas gave one last word to his friend before leaving him be. We're here for you, always. But take your time," were the words that left his mouth before returning to the front. As Core sat there in his own world of regret, he slowly craned his right hand forward and clicked his index finger upon his palm, summoning forth a holographic diorama of his family. An image of him next to his mother and father, Celeste and Nova. And of course, his little brother, Void, who he had his arm around in the image. With faint tears streaming down his face, Core simply held the image close and silently prayed to Matira that they were okay. "I'll see you soon," he said before gazing back out to the front window, watching as the sea of stars and realities drifted on by without a care in the world. "I'll fix this. I will fix this. I promise," Core whispered as his thoughts clouded his judgment. Journeys Ahead. Lineage. Chapter 1. Little Miracles. Written and narrated by T.S. ProArt. Clack, 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 came a continuous sound that echoed and bounced off all living creatures and plant life. Clack, 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 all across the deep woods behind Aurora City. To a wanderer, they could have easily been mistaken for a gun being fired off, or perhaps the fallings of deer hooves smacking against rocky riversides. However, the truth was much more than one would think. As a gentle early February snowfall began to descend down, a duo were hard at work within an open patch within the woods. With hammers and tools in hand, both Void and his and Jaida's newly created robotic companion, Jet, were knee-deep in creating a dream home. Wooden pillars and planks had been crafted up from the ground, forming the skeletal base for a soon-to-be cabin. During the Christmas just a little over a year prior, Jaida had brought up the fact that the two of them really wanted to create a home for themselves, that being a cozy cabin not too far off from the city. It had only been now that the Spark decided that it was time to make that dream a reality, for a special someone was soon to join him, Jaida, and Pavnu's little family. "Master Novason, would you care for some assistance over there?" Jet politely asked, looking to his creator that sat upon an upper wooden beam. The robot was no longer a computer screen attached to a Roomba. Jet had been greatly improved over the following years since his conception. He was now an upright, humanoid, lanky, but fit metallic form that could hold his own. Jet had actually been fully constructed from the parts once used in Void's supercomputer to track the glitched, making the robot extremely intelligent and self-aware in his own sense of the word. Everyone loved the joke that he was their own little C-3PO, and Void couldn't deny it. Being painted in shades of low, saturated blue hues and bright oranges, Jet's TV screen head smiled while his gloved robotic hand gestured for him to aid his maker, but Void simply brushed him off in a decline. I appreciate it, buddy, but I got this one. Raising his arm up, with a hammer in hand, Void tapped a sharp nail into a massive plank of wood, lodging it hard and deep into the cabin's skeletal form, all while with a very prominent smile upon his face. Very well. Call if you need assistance. Void's robotic companion reminded before stretching his arms up and flipping to the very top of the roof, proceeding to rapidly hammer in nails faster than you could say Novasun 5 times backwards. The day had been a mixture of heats and colds. Snow littered the ground, but it was in a state of half frozen, half melted. Green grass still blossomed from the ground below, while a gentle river stream calmly splashed on from behind, or rather in front of the cabin. As the snow continued to gently fall upon the spark, he took a long moment before breathing in and out with a sense of accomplishment. Never had he expected to be in such a serene yet amazing position. 6 years ago, he was at ground zero, alone and lost. But today, he not only had friends, but a real family, people that loved him as much as he loved them. Void was truly happy for once, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. Especially with the special someone that made her presence known mere seconds after this trail of thought. Blue! Jida's words called closely from behind. Blue? She asked again as the distant sound of snow crunching beneath her feet could be heard for all to hear. Speak of the angel, Void said with a pleased tone before hopping off the support beam and turning around. Facing towards the trees and riverstead, Void perked up with glee upon seeing his wife slowly marching her way forward. A canoe boat was rested behind at the water's edge, suggesting that she had rowed her way there. With steady steps, the musician, or rather now, radio station host, marched up a small incline towards her husband, who gently descended to help her maneuver forward. Well, what brings the Witch of the Woods to embark upon these parts? Void jokingly asked, leaving Jida to roll her eyes with a small scoff. Heh, asks the troll who's building the mud hut in her path. Jida joked back, leaving the two of them to chuckle and then share a small kiss. I see you took the canoe, Void mentioned as he took his wife by the hand and began to help her ascend the slope, gently with one foot after the other. Jida, with her other hand clutched around her stomach, was wearing a pretty average set of clothes. A manly red sweater with cream-colored stripes, being added with slightly torn jeans and a pair of old brown boots. The only striking differences was her hair that had been tied down as 2 pigtails and a ponytail in the back, as well as having a bun inside her oven. Warping is off the charts for the time being, remember? So I used the location station back in Nox's workshop. Real nifty creation you two cooked up. Jida expressed before she gazed upon the outline shape of the cabin. And nifty craftsmanship here too. Jida expressed through an astonished face as she gently leaned her head against the Sparks, who couldn't help but accept. You're getting taller. Smiling, Void nuzzled the side of his head against his wife's, letting the warmth of her hair caress him into a gentle summer's grasp. I'll catch up to you at some point. The Spark returned before asking, So, what brings you all the way out here? Taking her head off Void, Jida stood a few inches back and held her stomach with both of her hands in a gentle manner. She then shrugged her shoulders with a small gesture before speaking. 1, Nock needs your help with something. 2, I wanted to see how you and Jet were doing. And 3, you haven't said hi to our baby yet today. Jida stated with a smirk as she gently rubbed her now noticeably large stomach. The one who wielded cosmic fire was now nearing the end stages of her pregnancy. Her stomach was at the max, and she would be due within the next week or two. A gentle yet lenient purple-blue glow of constellations faintly swirled from behind Jida's sweater fabric, showing that the new-to-be-born Spark would most certainly retain aspects from their parents, only notes being that of Void's blue-colored energy with Jida's cosmic fire. Who else knew what the little one could do one day? Smiling with a nod, Void approached and knelt down to be head level with Jida's stomach. Softly leaning forward, he placed both of his hands upon her left and right hand stomach sides, before caressing his forehead against the glowing aura. As they touched, Void felt his soul swirl with warmth, as the sensation of his child pressed back, not as a kick, but as though their tiny head rested back upon their father's. I think they missed you, Jida said with a giggling smile, leaving Void to tower back upon his feet. And I miss them, as well as you today, he said with a tired but albeit blessed expression. Let's go help your brother with whatever he needs. Turning, the duo began to slowly make their way back down to the canoe, but before they entered, Void turned and pointed to Jet before asking, Hey, you alright with working on that stuff on your own for a bit? Looking up, Jet's computer face flashed into that of a thumbs up, before he swiftly went back to work. Awesome. The spark returned before helping Jida seat herself down. He then took a paddle by the canoe's seat side, and then got inside himself. With a grunt and push, the two of them were swiftly off and heading down the calm river stream. As the waves carried the couple forth, Void rode from his left and then to his right, following the stream while also occasionally glancing upon Jida, who was sneaking glances at both him as well as her stomach. Like a cat in her lap, she brushed her hand across her belly's rounded shape, feeling her child's energy and letting the warmth of said child fuel her soul with a form of love Void couldn't comprehend. The bond between a child and their mother was something only they could understand. All Void could do was just smile at the prospect of what the future would hold. He had never seen Jida so happy. It made him happy. Do you feel the gentle waves, little one? The calming sensation of your father rowing us forth? Jida asked her child, before looking out to the wilderness at her sides. Not too long now. These woods will be your backyard. A place where you'll play. A place where you'll learn. But most importantly, a place where you'll be happy. Jida added as she craned her wintry eyes up the Void, who solemnly nodded his head with a blushing blue face. Me and your father, Uncle Knock and Cut, Aunt Sarv and Uncle Tuck, will all take good care of you, shower you with unconditional love, teach you the wonders of the world. Oh, just you wait, little one. Jida expressed once more as her hair flustered into a pink glow. Void, have you thought of a name for our little miracle yet? Perking up and gently setting the paddle down, Void sat slightly hunched while looking upon his wife, and then simply shrugged. In my culture, it was always the mothers who got to decide upon the name. As you've come to know by now, baby sparks take a little over a year to develop before birth. So it was a custom to allow the mothers who carry them for that long to make the choice on what to name their infant. It only seemed right in our people's eyes. Void revealed, leaving Jida to tilt her head with a sudden new knowledge of his people's traditions. Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, it has been over a year with you and me, little one. Jida expressed as she rubbed her stomach once more. But this is our baby, Void. Surely you must have thought of something during that time. Jida expressed with a heartfelt smile towards her husband. Well, I would be lying if I were to say I hadn't thought of anything. Tell you the truth, Freckles, I think our baby's gonna be a girl. The spark began as he set his sights back upon Jida's stomach, watching it shimmer and glow with its purplish blue hues. If you insist so, I would like her name to be Jane. Blinking with another head tilt, Jida glanced from Void and then down to her stomach once more, before rubbing it again. Jane. I like that. Truly. But something tells me that our little one is going to be a boy. He seems to be a fighter like his father. Jida replied as the baby kicked against her stomach, leaving Void to return the look with an eyebrow raise. If so, I was thinking about the name Jay. Jida then revealed, leaving Void to ponder. He softly gruffed out. Was that a I like it grumble or an I hate it grumble? Jida inquired, leaving Void to raise his head once more and smile. No, I like it. J. Voidson. Has a nice ring to it. Taking the paddle once more, Void began to row the three of them forward once again. The snowfall continued downwards as per usual, while the glimmering light of the sun shined down golden rays from in between the trees. Even deer danced by the river's edge, really making things feel all the more peaceful. However, Jida suddenly asked a question that Void couldn't deny in answering. So, if female sparks got to name their children, why did your mom name you Void? Nodding his head, the spark lifted his paddle out of the water once more and thought for a moment, reflecting on the past and recalling as to why he was named the way he was. She named me Void to keep in line with her and my father's names. Nova and Celeste are shortened terms that you'd relate to outer space with. Nova stars, celestial observations. It was no coincidence I would be named something similar. So, when she decided to name me Void, I always saw it as another term that one would describe as the endless space that housed all stars and worlds that surround us. Void explained, making Jida nod in an understanding and enlightened gesture. I see. I guess that would mean they saw you as their world. What surrounded them? Kept them together? Jida then inquired, leaving Void to shrug again. That's one way to look at it. But names can mean anything. But I'll take your meaning as such. Void finished as the three continued to float downstream. So, if you were named Void, then what was the meaning behind your brother's name? Core? That doesn't sound very space-like. Unless I'm wrong. Jida then asked, leaving the spark to ponder for a moment. He knew the answer, but he had to find the right words for it. My older brother was named Core because he was the centerpiece in holding my family together for a time. In the early days of relocating, after the ages of fighting and battles, the Sparks struggled to survive and find their footing before coming across Salvaheim. From what my parents told me, Core was only an infant during those trying times, but he was the glue that kept my parents going forward. The core to it all. Without him, I doubt they would have had the strength to continue on. He's what they would probably call a miracle child, if anything. Void finished once again, before taking the paddle and pushing them to shore. I see, but now I gotta ask if names are that significant. Why choose the name Jane Blue? Jida questioned as the spark got out of the boat and proceeded to help Jida out as well. It just sounds cute when saying it with your name beside it. Jida and Jane. You gotta admit it has a nice ring. Void expressed as both him and Jida locked hands. What about you? Why the name Jay? Void inquired with a head tilt. Turning, they both faced a ring-like device that was mounted in an open clearing, a prototype teleporter machine called the location station, simply crafted to make transportation easier, but mainly created to help Jida prevent warping and hurting the baby in any shape, way, and form. She could still warp if she wanted to, but she feared bouncing her child may cause some problems before birth. Jay was the middle name of my little brother, Jackson J. Woods. Jida revealed as they both walked up to the location station. I see. That holds more merit than me finding something cute, I guess. Void responded before reaching out and clicking a few buttons upon a keypad and opening a rift to Nox's workshop. A bright teal-green glow quickly swirled to life in a whirlpool formation that led to both Void and Jida squinting from its blinding aura. Blue, don't say that. I think it's touching that you thought about me when considering a name, but time here will tell soon on what to name our miracle. Reaching down, Jida rubbed her stomach once more before kissing Void's cheek in a loving gesture. With a nodding gruff from the spark, they turned to face the portal and together marched through, leaving the woods and heading back to Aurora City. While crossing through to the other side, Void and Jida were suddenly met with the flying form of a piece of metal heading straight for their heads. Gasping and taking Jida by her arm, the spark quickly pulled her as well as himself downwards to avoid the chunk that cracked hard against the location station. Whoa, what the? The spark gasped out as he and Jida quickly stood back up and locked eyes with a bizarre sight. They had returned to the workshop, but found Kot, Sarv, Tucker, and of course, Nock, dealing with one of his most recent yet longly expensive creations. Spinning around with a rotating waist and massive fat arm set, spun a work-in-progress mech suit, Nock's mech suit to be exact. After the Aurora Snake incident, as everyone had come to call it, Nock figured it was time that he help and join the fight if something similar were to occur one day. That thought process led him down the 3-year road in making what he called the Thumper, a large battle mech that he could pilot and fight within. However, the whole project had been a hefty mess for a good while now. Even Povnu was trying her best to calm the situation. "Novison, a little help over here, please!" Kot cried as Nock attempted to maneuver past the swinging arms and reach the cockpit. "Damn thing is moving too fast!" Sarv yelled in annoyance as she tried to reach her hand inside the control deck with her Nock-sized digits. "Oh, bye, Matira." The spark muttered in an awkward state before approaching the situation. Brushing everyone aside, Void locked his eyes upon the quickly rotating machine, deciding upon when to make his move. Round and round it went, spinning with cylinders that would knock anyone out cold with a singular clack. Round and round it continued, before Void made his determined move. Lunging forward and reaching out, the spark gruffed and caught one of the machine's arms with both hands. Huffing and pushing against the clicking gears and servos within, Void summoned a small surge of his cosmic electricity and sent a wave of its power into the robot, stun-locking it and sending its wiring into a manual short-circuit reset. With a crack, pop, and electrical glitch with a slow reversing shift, the mech suit recoiled itself back around and stood in a mandatory position, although now slightly smoking and sparking from its malfunction. "You guys alright?" Void asked as he gazed back down upon Nock, who had fallen upon his rear during the skirmish. Yeah. It wasn't spinning like that when Jida left. Just smoking. Thanks." Nock awkwardly elaborated and thanked as Void reached down and took his hand, proceeding to then gently hoist him back upon his feet. "Anytime, brother." The spark ended as Kot came over and began to brush Nock off himself. "You alright?" he asked, leaving Nock to merely nod. "Thanks for that. How you doing, hun?" Sarv then greeted as she brushed herself off. "Haven't seen you since, well, many Mondays," Tucker added as he and his wife approached. "I'm doing alright. I've been helping Jida when needed, and I've been really busy with our home project these past few days." The spark replied as his wife slowly approached at his side. "Thanks again for letting me take these few months off of work. It really means the world." Void continued, leaving Sarv to nod her head. "Oh, hon, you're more of a family member than an employee. Take all the time you need." The massive Thorn expressed, leaving Void to gracefully nod his head. "Say, is anyone getting hungry? I can make us some hot dogs." Tucker then blurted, looking down the Void, Jida, and then the Nock and Kot. "Hot dogs? Anyone?" The large bull of a man asked as the afternoon light shimmered in through the now repaired garage door. "Thanks for the offer, Tuck, but I'm actually in need of a nap. The little one's been... well, you'll understand when you have kids one day," Jida said as she gently yawned and rested against the spark. "I should probably take her up to bed. Maybe some other time, Tuck," Void affirmed in a small voice while lifting his metal hand up, leaving Tucker to return in a fist bump. Once impact was made, they both made an explosion motion that led to the two wives laughing. Over the last few years of knowing one another, both Void and Tucker grew to actually be pretty good friends, if not near best friends. But that title was reserved for Nock. Yet, there was no denying that a bond had been formed between the two of them. Taking Jida by her hand, the spark began to make his way towards the nearby flight of stairs that would take them to the upper floor. As they reached its first step, Void, with a careful maneuver, scooped his wife up and carried her within his large, bulky arms. Whoa! Void, are you sure you can... Before Jida could finish, the spark smiled and rolled his eyes before ascending forwards upon the steps. I can manage a lot of weight, love. You know this. You're but a feather. Void reminded Jida as he carefully made his way up the stairs. Besides, you're already carrying a lot. Let me do this. Jida didn't know what to say. All she could do was smile and just lean her head against Void's chest that sparked with electric blue energy from within. Oh, okay, you big softy. She returned, leaving Void to quietly chuckle. Entering into their shared room, Void maneuvered over towards his sleeping quarters and began to rest Jida upon his bed. Alright, love, here you are. Laying Jida down with tender care, both her and the spark smiled at each other with a tiny thank you, leaving her lips in response. Okay, I'll be home later tonight. I gotta get back and help Jed out with... In the middle of his reasoning, Jida reached out her hand and gripped it upon the sparks, proceeding to then speak aloud and cut off his words. No, she said with her ever-present contagious smile. Stay here. Sighing with a blushing roll in his eyes, Void tried to shrug off Jida and reason with her. Freckles, as much as I would love to, I have to get back. With another tug and grunt, Jida pulled the spark closer before speaking again. No, stay. Shaking his head with his own smile, Void knelt down to be eye level with his wife before reasoning again. Jida, I really need to go, hun. Jet's gonna be wondering what's taking me so long. Furrowing her gaze and pulling Void in close, Jida took his other hand in hers before speaking a final time, letting the spark know that there would be no arguing with this one. He can wait a little bit longer. Come here. With one last tug, Void found himself being pulled into the bed, Jida's arms wrapped around his body as he was lovingly held close to her form, as well as the little ones. Sighing with a happily defeated tone, Void let out a quiet, fine, before wrapping his arms back around her in return. But when I get up, I need to get back to helping him. Our dream home won't be done with one set of hands, you know. Nodding with a sleepy and groggy gesture, Jida quickly fell asleep with her face in Void's chest. All the spark could do was continue to smile and stroke her hair. Maybe a nap would be good, he thought. Although he had been happier than ever, the spark couldn't deny that he had also felt a weight of stress on his life. For the first time in years, a spark would be born in the world, the first one since... Looking over his shoulder, Void set his sights upon the Lotus Cube, out of the desk, but collecting dust under the lampshade. His child would be the firstborn spark since Lotus's genocide upon Salvaheim, is what Void began thinking. The spark was still unsure about the cube's purpose. He kept it around to remind him as to why he fights, but he couldn't shake the idea that Lotus could still very well be alive within its confines. Best bet in the end was to make sure it stayed with him and out of others' grasp. Look away, wait, don't ya? The spark mumbled before taking the cube and turning it around. He then turned himself back to both Jida and his child, and then simply nuzzled himself back into them. Let yourself rest, Void told himself. Let yourself sleep, was all he could say, before the gentle grasp of darkness carried him into the lands of slumber. However, it wasn't long until something began to stir within the spark. It was a deep feeling, one that made him ever so slightly turn and grumble in his sleep. His heart then began to beat at a rapid pace out of nowhere. The electricity that buzzed beneath his biomechanical skin began to rise in energy. Most of all, was a sense of familiarity. Was he dreaming? Remembering? Void couldn't tell within his own head. Was he asleep or awake? what was this feeling? It felt nice and eerie all the while. It was only when he tried to rationalize it when something took him out of his weird limbo-like state. Something that awoke him to life. Shooting upright to the sound of a violent boom and flash from the window, Void and Jida scrambled with wide, startled eyes, whilst feeling the sensation of the workshop shaking along with a good chunk of the city. It felt as though a bomb had just gone off nearby. For all they knew, it could have been. What was that? Jida shouted in shock while reaching down to her stomach. I don't know. Knock? Void asked aloud as he quickly got out of the bed and stood to his feet. You guys feel that shit? The short mechanic yelled up to the two as the sounds of several footsteps began to run up the stairs. Are y'all alright? What the hell was that? Sarv loudly chimed in as everyone from downstairs ran the Void and Jida's room faster than ever before. Even Povnu whined and held her tails in between her legs. That wasn't you guys, right? Jida worriedly questioned as she slowly stood up as well and using Void as a rest. What? No. You guys didn't see a flash from outside? Cod asked as he and a few of the others turned towards the large window within the bedroom, and then fell silent in shock. Upon seeing this shift in expression, Void raised one of his eyebrows and then set his sights towards the glass behind him, falling into a sudden shock as well. Whoa. He spoke in a low tone as something caught his eye from outside. What is it, Blue? Inquired Jida as the spark began to approach the window, taking notice of something bright within the sky. Everyone was now focused upon the large piece of glass, for what they saw could only be described as some kind of anomaly. Within the skies above Aurora was the unmistakable form of some kind of swirling light source. It glinted off gentle hazes of both orange and purples, both sparking and enticing with mystic hazes. For Void, the best way to describe it was as though a four-pointed star had been liquefied. Its edges all swirled around with a continuous ray of light that created an almost milky spiral for all to see. Slowly turning around, Void met the sights of everyone within the room, and it appeared they all shared the same thought. That being the simple phrase, not again. Everyone to the roof. We need to get a better look at this thing, exclaimed the Spark as he quickly walked past the others and into the upper stair hall. With Jida following behind, everyone else with concerned looks went right behind her in a quick tow, all following the Spark till he reached another small flight of stairs that led to the workshop's highest peak. Ascending the few short steps, Void marched up before a door and took its handle, pulling it down and then throwing it open to the slight winter afternoon. What is it? Jida asked, following closely behind Void, who was now atop the stone roof of the workshop. I don't know, he answered with a baffled sense in his soul. Approaching the ledge, Void squinted his eyes towards the massive vortex in a very confused manner. It appeared to be both calm and gentle in nature. Nothing crazy emanated from it. No lightning strikes, no frost beasts, snakes, or even glitches were to be seen. Just a gentle formation of light that the Spark felt almost drawn towards. Please don't be snakes. I'm ready to deal with those savages again, Tucker prayed out as he scratched the back of his balding head. It's quite pretty, and terrifying now that I look at it, Ka added while Povnu approached and sat down next to her caretaker, ears back and slightly worried with the wine. As everyone continued to look upon the anomaly above, Jida quietly glanced a look to her husband, only to see something unexpected. His once dim swirly veins were now looking to emanate that same color within the sky, a soft mixture of both blues and slight purples and oranges. Even his eyes began to reflect the same hues. However, he didn't seem to notice it. Blue? Jida asked while Void ever so gently took a step forward. He's glowing. Is that normal? Cod asked in a whisper while leaning down the knock, who nodded with a tad bit of uncertainty. He normally does that when he's powering up or if he's mad. But this is different, he quietly explained. As Void continued to stare upon the vortex, the sounds of the world around him felt as though the silence. Jaida's words came as muffled noises, as Void's vision then began to blur at the corners of his peripherals. Wincing, he slowly raised his hand forward, fingers outstretched and reaching out for the large swirl. It felt too familiar for comfort, like the smell of a mother's famous dish after years of being away. Void felt nothing but nostalgia towards the essence that radiated off its form. What are you? He quietly asked, before all hell broke loose. With a sudden pulse in energy, the source of light erupted with another bang of power, accompanied as well by a second deafening boom. To coincide with all of this, everyone's worst fears came to light. Something large and towering crossed through to the other side. It was a massive, skyscraper-sized spacecraft, one that looked to be alien in aesthetic and shape. This craft was absurdly massive and hovered in an upright position. A lengthy, bulky, almost conish shape made up the upper form of the Goliath, until segmenting down to 4 large tubes. These apartment-sized tubes connected to a lower middle face that buzzed with an orange glow that looked almost like fire. Underneath this massive middle segment was one last set of pieces that spiraled down to create an almost stinger needle-like shape, glowing with a hot and smoky yellow source of power. Around the craft also spun 3 giant rotating rings, each of which burned with high electrical velocity. To accompany these power color surges, the craft was made up in gunmetal grays and small pulsating cracks of purple and blue hazes. Electricity buzzed and sparked across its form, looking to be causing mass amounts of damages to itself in the process. Holy shit! Jaida gasped out as those on the roof stood back in shock at what they were seeing. None of them had bare witness to anything like it. A machine of flight so massive yet terrifyingly spectacular. The city of Aurora then began to react as well. Some people shouted in fright from below, while cars honked and came to screeching halts. Chaos was about to arise. Void? Jaida asked as the sparks stared on in awe towards the large craft. He, like the others, was shocked by its sudden appearance. But still, that feeling persisted in his soul, begging to get closer, to know more. The technology on its craft even looked familiar. Without warning, an electrical explosion came forth. The left side of the ship suddenly erupted with a devastating influx of energy. Metal parts and flames flew into the air. Some of these parts sparked with electricity, and others looked to get violently torn away from Aurora's reality through lightning-striking rifts. Then another eruption occurred on the right-hand side, this one popping one of the large tubes and spraying forth a sea of parts and fire, along with a bright green power source of some kind that was also violently ripped into some kind of dimension. Leaning forward, it was now obvious that the craft was coming down. Smoke trailed off its form as most of its mass began to break apart in small segments. Another eruption of energy exploded once again, this time releasing both a red and yellow source of light that were swiftly ripped to different worlds like the green one. The craft was now heading down into a nosedive, falling at a violent velocity that released an almost ear-deafening wail of screaming engines, until at last, shooting out one last spark of power, this one purple and towards the trees behind Aurora. It's coming down! Oh, Jesus, it's coming down! Nox shouted in utter horror as the ship neared closer and closer to the surface, almost looking to crash right into the workshop itself from their perspectives. Snapping out of his trance, Void quickly turned to his left and threw his hands out, deploying his battle mask over Jaida's face. Huddle and cover your eyes! He then shouted to everyone as that familiar blue electrical surge began to arise within his horns. Doing as the spark did so, Nock and the others hunkered down while Void threw his right arm out and brought forth his battle axe. Gripping its handle tightly, Void sent a surge of cosmic electricity into its rounded metallic form. When designing this newer version of the blade, Void installed a series of electrical conductors within its handle shaft, allowing for a supercharged form of power when needed, not just for battle, but for protection as well. Once the axe was ignited into its burning blue hue, Void rose it up and slammed its end handle hard into the roof of the workshop. From its crescent blade sparked forth a blue force field that surrounded the Spark, his family, and the shop itself. "Brace yourselves!" Void then called, as he pulled both Jida and Pofnu close, feeling and sensing the massive craft barrel right over his and everyone else's heads. Opening their eyes, Void and the rest still found themselves to be alive and atop a still standing workshop. However, lots of smoke now descended and covered the city, as well as a slight downfall of debris. Gently getting back to his feet and helping Jida and Pofnu up as well, Void turned to the rest, seeing that they were also alright and without a scratch. Cars continued to honk and police sirens now rang across the land, as the whole city of Aurora now stood in utter confusion to what had just happened. Was it aliens? A government experiment? Nobody really knew for certain, but the fact remained that something large crashed a ways off, now visibly smoking many miles into the deep wilderness before Aurora, looking to only be a far-off speck. Had both crashed hard and flew quickly. Its sheer size made its form look to be much slower and closer on sight. First glitches, then snakes, now a freaking spacecraft! Nox shouted in a shocked annoyance as he brushed himself off, while the force field and Void's axe retracted back into his build. What is that? Tucker asked aloud as he helped Sarv to her feet and stared on at the massive crash a ways off within the trees. Some kind of space needle? Or something like that. Cott chimed in as everyone made their way to the other side of the roof, staring on at the large ship that looked to now be a blurry but smoking shape from afar. "That thing is massive!" exclaimed Sarv, who coughed and waved smoke away from her face. "It could be dangerous. Or friendly. If it had passengers, if it does..." "Void, what do you make of this?" Jida asked as she gazed upon the Spark, who was still noticeably curious to the craft. His veins had now stopped glowing, for the portal sealed above, but Jida knew that something was up. Void's next few words only confirmed it. I'm going to check it out. You guys stay here." Rolling their heads, everyone locked eyes with the Spark with surprise, up until Nox spoke out in disapproval. "You're not alone, you're not," he boasted, placing his hands upon his hips. "Yeah, are you crazy? We're coming with you if you plan to do something stupid like that," Sarv added, leaving the Spark to wince. He knew everyone around him could hold their own, but the prospect of getting them in possible danger still irked Void in a weird way. That sense of losing loved ones was still a real anxiety for him. Even after all this time, he couldn't shake it. "All of us," Jida then finished, wrapping her hand around the Sparks in a tight hold. Perking up with shock to this, Void whirled his head towards his wife and gazed upon her with disapproval. "What? No. You're a few weeks from being due. If whatever it is that crashed down poses a threat, I will not allow you to tag along," expressed the Spark, leaving Jida to bite the inside of her cheek. "My powers have doubled in the last couple of years, Void. I can defend myself. If push comes to shove, I can warp out of here. A few warps shouldn't hurt the little one," Jida reasoned, rubbing her stomach once more. "You can barely walk up the stairs," Void worriedly groaned in a whisper, until Jida reached her left hand up and caressed the side of his cheek. "Listen, I love that you're worried about my safety, but I need to make sure they have a father in their life," Jida retorted, patting her belly and leaving Void the grimace in an unhappy expression. "Jida, please," he pleaded, only to be denied once again. "We're going. All of us." She finished, gazing at the crew. I haven't done anything like this before. Are we really gonna? Cott nervously mentioned while tugging on his blue sweater collar. Well, I'm down. Let's grab some essentials, exclaimed Tucker as he quickly made his way downstairs. Right behind you, love, joined Sarv as she too descended downwards. Guys, Void weakly called, but everyone was already making their moves. There was no arguing. They had all made their decisions. Blue, if we all go together, we'll be stronger. You're not on your own anymore, and you don't need to venture forth to danger acting as though you are, said Jida, leaving the spark to quietly hold his tongue and think. Shortly after, Void felt a small kiss upon his cheek that calmed his nerves for the time being. It always did as such. Okay. Just stay close. Please. Void asked, almost having the same attitude he had when she first joined him those first few years ago. Both him, Jida, as well as Pofnu then turned towards the smoking ship in the distance, so curious as to who or what they could possibly find. Arriving upon the shoreline next to their unfinished cabin, Void, Jida, Pofnu, Nock, and Cott all stepped out of the canoe that somehow managed to hold their combined weight. As they stepped upon the slight, muddy, and sandy shores, Sarv landed from above with Tucker clasped in her talons. She had carried the big guy all the way there and landed the both of them with a tired grunt. It didn't help that he had also brought with him an overly large survival pack. The forest now looked to be doused within clouds of fog, which in truth were just the downpouring leftovers of smoke that were left behind the ship's fall. Deploying his mask to breathe and see better, Void turned and gestured for the others to do the same. Nodding with a flick of her wrist, Jida summoned a ray of her cosmic energy to conceal her face, along with giving Nock, Sarv, and Tucker similar glowing transparent face masks. Cott, however, didn't need as such, for he didn't breathe with his upside-down head, as he was practically a living specter in a sense. As for Pofnu, she was a magical beast. Mere smoke wouldn't harm her, even if it had been 10 times stronger within the air. Master Novason, welcome back, the words of Jet called out as he rolled in from the smoke on a pair of tiny wheels underneath his metal feet. Jet, you alright? Void asked as he approached and brushed off his and Jida's creation. Yes, splendid even. However, may I ask, what came down from the sky? It gave me quite the startle, inquired the computer-headed robot with a slight tilt in his build. That's what we're trying to figure out ourselves. Knowing Aurora's law enforcement policies, their reaction time will be slower than I'd like to admit. So I wanted, or I guess we want, to see what's up just in case things are bad. Void explained with a concerned set of words before turning his head towards a large gust of billowing smoke that seemed rather close to where the cabin was being built. You think you could tag along? We could use all the help, asked Void, in which making Jet nod and cross his arms. Of course, sir. Walking up alongside her husband, Jida turned to face the rising smoke from afar, and then held out her hand with a gentle curl in her fingers. Watching on, everyone witnessed as Jida's palm gently glowed a faint orange hue, looking to draw in small amounts of smoke as well as ambers from above, all up till she closed said palm and turned back towards the others. Crash site is about 5 miles upstream, she stated, leaving Void the nod, but Sarv the question. Wait a second. What did you just do, hon? Smiling with a shrug, Jida turned and began marching her way towards the tree line with an almost snippy-sounding response. Last year, I discovered I could sense the heat length of where distant fires are. Thought it was useless, but hey, pretty convenient, right? Shaking his head with a small little laugh, Void got alongside Jida, and the both of them now led the group forth into the unknown. For a good while, they all ventured through thick trees and slightly snowy terrain. The wildlife in the area had fallen silent due to the sudden intrusion of the craft's downfall, leaving nothing but the distant sounds of water and crunching snow to fill the soundless space. As they continued, Void occasionally found himself glancing at Jida. She moved at a slower, more steady pace now, a complete contrast to how she would usually move before the pregnancy. She seemed tired but focused and determined to accompany him and the others. As much as Void hated her being out there in her current state, he couldn't deny that she was always both strong and caring in almost every aspect. He admired that about her, even when carrying an infant. She refused to back down. Made the spark a nervous wreck, but he couldn't deny the woman what she saw as fit.
I've always wanted to meet aliens.
Tucker began, trying to make conversation, and then making a few of the others turn their heads in response. We don't know if it's aliens, Tuck. Could be spacemen, or just a lost piece of technology. Sarv reasoned with her husband, as Nock, Jet, and Kot joined in on the conversation.
Well, it could always be something else. I mean, who thought flying snakes would be a thing? I didn't.
Began the mechanic, causing a whole conversation to begin from behind. Jida, however, wanted to discuss another thing that had been bugging her, what she saw back on the roof. Void, what was about that vortex that got you all entranced? Your body seemed to, react to it. Jida brought up, while Pofnu trotted forward between her and the spark. I don't know, Freckles, replied Void as he kicked a small stone across the ground. It felt like seeing an old friend for the first time in years. It was like it was both something similar, yet something completely different. It was both nostalgic, but unnerving. Turning to look upon his fiery-haired companion, Void watched as the gears inside Jida's head began to both click and spin with thought. What do you mean by nostalgic? She asked. Looking back forward, Void took in a long breath, knowing full well what he meant. However, the prospect of letting his imagination run wild to possibly give him a false sense of hope was something he didn't want to dwell upon. But he had to speak his mind. He knew better not to bottle things up anymore. It was like something I felt back when I was younger. Before everything fell apart. The energy that rift gave off, it was eerily similar to... Before the spark could finish his trail of speech, both him and Jida stopped in a clearing that Pofnu sat within, bearing witness to a massive heap of destruction laying waste before themselves. Chunks of metal along with a large empty crater lay rested around a mangled and broken formation. Trees slightly burned with a purple flame. The snow and grass lay thrown about, while everything else in the immediate area had a subtle warmth to it. Hold that thought. Void asked the Jida, now approaching the massive imprint within the ground. By this point, everyone else had come across the site, all curious as to what they would find. Purple fire. Kot asked with a cross in his arms.
Must have been the piece that whizzed over our noggins.
Tucker theorized as he hobbled over a chunk of twisted, bent metal. The purple one? Nock inquired. Well, duh, quickly returned the Thorn. If that's the case, then where's it at? Jida then questioned as Void knelt down to some of the torn metal, looking to glow a dim orange hue beneath. Reaching his hands out, the spark began to knock some parts aside after noticing a larger slab wedged in the snow. I'm assuming it just blew up upon impact. Kot suggested, scratching his forehead as though if it were his chin. No, if that giant ball of fire blew up, it would have set this whole area ablaze. Explained the smaller mechanic, while Pofnu began to sniff the ground and then descend into the crater. That's a fair assumption, bro. If that's the case, then... Turning her head from Void and then to the crater itself, Jida found there to be something peculiar about its form. On the left ledge side, Povnu was sniffing and pawing at a clear visible set of scratches, or rather claw marks of sorts. Falling silent and trailing her gaze upon the slope, Jida found there to be a trail of small holes and large oval indentations in the snow, a mixture of what appeared to be unknown footprints scurrying off into the wilderness. "Oh God," she muttered, while Void, oblivious to the whole scene, finally pried the piece of metal out of the snow. "Ugh, jeez, what are you made of, vibranium?" The spark asked before brushing off and then turning the large chunk around. After looking and examining its form for a long few seconds, Void's curious face soon fell to that of shock. Blinking with a now furrowing brow, Void's jaw hung just ever so slightly low as his brain began to piece together what he was seeing. It sent waves of uncertainty and disbelief into his heart, creating a visible shift in expression that everyone wordily took notice of. "Blue?" Jada asked as all eyes fell upon him. Without saying a word, Void continued to stare at the piece of metal with a shaken expression. His breathing tensed, his arms rattled, but most of all, his eyes were as wide as saucers. "Void?" Nock asked as Povnu ascended the crater and sat next to her owner with a whimpering call. This is... Raising an eyebrow and slowly marching forward, Jida gazed upon her husband, and then down to the burnt slab of metal within his hands. Something was up. The whole vibe suddenly felt wrong in the worst kind of way. The last time Jida had almost seen Void this worked up was when he left for Salvaheim. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Honey? What is it?" Jida inquired as she took hold of the metal and then leaned it down to see the other side. There, welded upon it, was a symbol, one that she quickly recognized. Although dented and burnt, it was unmistakable. It was the same symbol that rested upon Void's chest, the downward star-crested arrow, the insignia of the Sparks. Jaw-dropping as well with widening eyes, Jida slowly craned her gaze up to meet her husband's. A familiar sense of shock washed over her body as well, knowing full well what this could possibly mean. "Oh my God," she whispered as everyone else approached, curious as to what had shaken the married pair. "What's wrong, guys?" Jed asked as he rolled up alongside them and gazed down with a smiling head. Jed's fun little face then shifted to a new expression. His white-colored eyes and mouth shifted between both blue and orange before settling back to normal with an astonished look. His programming immediately took notice of the insignia and began to immediately decipher what it could truly be. "Chet, what is this?" Void asked in a state of complete disbelief, as everyone else watched from a distance, unsure if they should approach. As they all thought, Nock found himself looking at the smoky forest around himself, being both delighted and slightly concerned about its form, until something moved out of the corner of his eye. Rolling his head, the mechanic caught the glimpse of something maneuvering out of view. The smoke swirled and a branch crunched loudly, leaving the mechanic to gasp in slight fright. Guys?" he said as everyone else turned to see. "My creators, from my calculations and thought process, this metallic slab was forged only 3 or 4 Earth cycles around the sun, meaning it is still fresh and, in easier terms, a little over 3 years old." Jed explained as both Jida and Void craned their eyes upon him. "The crest isn't old, this is fresh. And there's only one race out there that would go the great lengths in smelting it at light." Jed finished, eyeing Void down with a baffled stare. "Are you suggesting that?" Void couldn't even finish his sentence. There then came another loud snap and pop from the trees, then a grumble and moan. Something was no longer hiding. It had made its presence known. But what? Is that a moose? Sarv asked, looking to reach for a firearm she had brought at her side.
Could be a bear,
Tucker added as he reached into his large backpack and pulled out a utility knife. A bear? Cod asked, wrapping his arm around Nox in a worried form of protection. As Void, Jida, and Jet got ready to discuss some more, they began to hear the sounds too, getting louder and more frequent as something massive began to circle them. Looking around themselves, the three quickly went back to back and carefully examined the lands with their ears. Pofnu then went on the defense. Her tails arched with a pinkish red energy as an audible snarl escaped her maws. Jet, activate protection protocol. Protect and guard Jida by all means necessary. Commanded the Spark as he slowly deployed his 2 blue Nova blades from his hands.
Of course, sir.
The robot replied as 2 shoulder turrets emerged from his back, along with a pair of orange glowing metal blades coming from out of his arms. Looking over her shoulder, Jida looked to say something as her hair grew to ever so slightly burn. Yet before a word could leave her mouth, the sound of silence suddenly arose into that of an ear-deafening roar. Bursting from the trees and smoke came forth a wintry white, purple spine-glowing beast. With a pair of long arms and 4 galloping spider-like legs, the blurry shape of a monster screeched with a deafening cry as it opened its maws wide to clamp upon Void, Jida, Pofnu, and Jet. Quickly acting fast, Void turned and pushed both Jida and Pofnu out of the way and into Jet's arms, leaving for only him to take the full crunching blow from the monster. The beast didn't even give time for anyone to scream to its sudden emergence, for with one quick clamp, the Spark found himself stuck within its glowing purple crystallized maws, and then carried forward to the thicket of the woods at an alarming speed. Void! Holy shit! Everyone shouted in utter horror as they watched the almost 20-foot albino beast carry the Spark away into the trees. Quickly rolling over to be back upon her paws, Pofnu barked loudly and then began to sprint headstrong after the monster, while the others awkwardly scrambled to follow. Snapping its jaws up and down, the alien-looking monster attempted to puncture and seep its fangs into the Spark's biomechanical form, but repeatedly found itself being shocked from his cosmic electricity that acted as a body defense. The surges of energy were akin to how a skunk would use its spray, or how a jungle frog uses its poison to ward off predators. Grunting with an annoyed snarl, Void rose his 2 arm blades back and forcefully stabbed them into the snout of the monster, which appeared to have a large purple-crested horn upon its snout. 4 beady eyes upon its left side widened in pain as the crystallized fleshy white beast swayed its head from side to side, now attempting to swing the Spark off. Advancing in from behind, with a red trail of energized light leaving behind her tails, came Pofnu, who now relied on her mystic abilities to just keep up with the creature. With a surge of red light, the Kitsune sent a wave of her energy into her paws and used it to leap forward at an impressive length. Dropping in from above, she opened her jaws and clamped hard upon the monster's saggy neck, causing the beast to stumble upon its side and then trip and fall down a steep hillside. The alien-looking creature then bellowed a roar as it let go of Void, now sending the 3 crashing hard down rocks and snowy-filled dirt. Amidst their fall, Void reached out and caught his pet before she would spiral out of control. Downwards they went, rolling and smashing against the rough terrain of frosted nature, all before entering a ravine that held a small ankle-deep river stream. At last, the 3 of them all splashed down and rolled upon rocks and clams. Void took the blunt of the fall for Pofnu, while the beast cried out in an anguished screech from afar. As water doused and seeped across the Spark's back, he gazed up to his pet, who shook her head with a little grunt. Good girl, Void said through his mask with a relieved breath, whilst Pofnu licked him in response. Whirling their heads back to the beast, Void and Pofnu quickly scrambled back up and stood side by side, now eyeing down the 4-legged monstrosity as it too stood to its full height. The creature was tall, around 18 to 19 feet in height. It had malnourished, saggy white and purple skin that looked to almost droop with ooze. 4 thick spider-like legs kept its lanky torso upright, while two long, almost broken-looking arms rested upon gnarly-looking knuckles, akin to how a gorilla would stand upon all fours. Sharp, knife-like purple-glowing spines protruded from its back, elbows, head, and of course its snout, that was accompanied by 8 eyes and rows of dagger-like teeth. The last thing of note was that its chest looked to be glowing in a sense. A dim, purple light pulsated like a heartbeat beneath its flesh, signifying that it was surging with some sort of energy. But as for what, Void and Pofnu didn't know. All they knew for certain was that they had a fight on their hands. A very nasty fight. With a powerful, earth-shattering pounce, the large beast smashed its large claws into the creek with an accompanied roar. The vibrations from its call shook both Void and Pofnu eternally, and spiked their souls to beyond defense. "Pofnu, Migi no Hoe!" Void commanded out in the Kitsune's native tongue, whilst bringing forth his battle axe. The albino monster with its jaws open wide ran towards the two of them while swinging its arms forward and backwards, looking like a linebacker charging at max speed. As it neared, Void dove to his left and Pofnu to her right, avoiding a devastating smash of fist upon the now splashing up water. Quickly turning around with a slash, Void delivered a deep burning cut into the back knee of the beast, causing it to stumble for only a moment. Upon the right, Pofnu pounced forward and clamped her jaws into the monster's abdomen. With a snarl, she promptly ripped a good chunk of its flesh with a flipping pullback. Howling in rage, the monster's back spines and horns began to burn bright with a coursing lavender source of power. As its spines fully bloomed with light, the energy housed within their forms quickly descended down through the monster's back and into its arms, and then to its knuckles. Now whirling around towards Void and smashing its fists down, the spark instantly flipped out of the way as sharp crystals shot out from the water below, having been summoned from the creature's strange aurora attack. As the spark rolled back upright through the air, he swung his axe with a turn and sliced a clean cut to the lower chin of the monster. Landing back to his feet, Void maneuvered backwards just a tad, allowing for the monster to release another screech into the air. "Pofnu, Miso no Nakara!" Out of the water, commanded the spark, as he gripped his axe with both hands and summoned a sharp surge of his electricity into its handle. Quickly sprinting to the shoreline and letting loose a bark, Pofnu watched as Void rose his axe up and then slammed its burning edge into the water. The entire stream looked to suddenly ignite with light as a powerful blast of electricity coursed through its liquefied form. Once it reached the monster, the beast was instantly engulfed within a web of bright and dark blue volts. Howling in pain, it smashed itself down into the water, beginning to pulsate with its purple rays of energy once again. From its smallest spine to its largest, Void watched in dismay as they grew to glow brighter and brighter, whilst its eyes and interior of its mouth shimmered to emanate the light as well. Ignoring the burning electricity going into its skin, the monster unhinged its jaw and summoned something that made Void lose his focus. Appearing from in front of its snout with a purple haze appeared a large, glowing, lavender Nova rune, magic that only sparks were capable of doing. What? Void quietly gasped out before suddenly being blindsided by a burning beam that shot from the rune's center. Gasping and reacting in the nick of time, Void summoned forth his regular blue-shaded Nova rune to counter the blast and defend himself. Now being pushed back by the powerful force, Void felt his heart beating and racing with an unimaginable amount of thuds. What was going on? Void asked himself. This couldn't be possible. His drawn feelings, the insignia, and now the beast using the magic only he and his people knew? He had never seen anything like this creature in Salvaheim. He had never seen a ship that large either. Something was up. Something that he had to get to the bottom of. Opening his chest cavity, Void shot forward a set of tiny rockets towards the monster, exploding both its legs and chest into a spray of purple matter upon impact. This attack caused the beast to lose its focus and cease its strange, taboo-looking Nova beam, allowing for Pofnu to then run back in and strike upon its neck. With her teeth sinking into its jugular, Pofnu pulled back once again, taking out a massive chunk of flesh with her mouth. This final attack alone seemed to finish the job, for the beast, after a short few spurts of blood and cries of pain, slowly crumbled upon its back and smashed hard into the shallow water, going limp and lifeless. "Good girl, Pofnu. Good girl," Void croaked out as his kitsune ally ran back up and nuzzled against his leg. Slowly focusing his gaze back forward, Void locked his eyes upon the monster, or whatever it was. That rune it emanated. Void couldn't shake it. He couldn't shake any of it. It almost felt like a fever dream. All of it felt off, uncanny and not right in a sense. Were these the actual doings of Sparks? Could Moore truly have been alive? No, that was impossible, Void told himself. It couldn't be. This had to be something else. Something different. He couldn't accept that possibility. It was impossible. "Void! Void!" Jed's words cried out from behind with a series of wet foot-falling splashes. Turning, the spark was quickly embraced by his beloved, who then pressed her forehead against his metal mask. "Are you okay?" she asked out as Jet and the others emerged from the smoke with panting breaths. Void didn't know what to say. He was both in a state of shock and deep thought. Everything he thought he knew seemed to almost fall into jeopardy. He needed answers, and was gonna find them. Amidst his trail of thought, Void just nodded his head with a shaken posture, just relieved that the beast hadn't taken a bite out of her or anyone else. All whirling their heads, Void and the others bear witness to the creature slowly standing back upon its feet, raising its arms up, then slamming them back down. Everyone watched as its burnt, cut body began to suddenly heal over at a rapid pace. Its skin returned to normal, while its wounds reformed to its natural state, like nothing had been dealt to it to begin with. "God damn!" Tucker cried as he readied his knife. Standing firm with astonished fear, Void deployed his blades, Jida her fire, and Jet with his arsenal. Pulling out a pair of her pistols, Sarv aimed them towards the creature's head, while both Nock and Kot hid behind Pofnu's now glowing, snarling body. Cracking itself back to an upright position, the monster sounded the cackle with a devilish smile, before slowly beginning to march its way forward. "What the hell?" Void called out in shock as the beast got ready to attack, when suddenly, from out of the smoke behind it, came something that halted the monster in its tracks. What looked to be a large, dark black and orange glowing tendril shot out from the clouded haze, wrapping itself around the beast's waist with a slimy, radiating form. Then another strand appeared, shooting out from the smoke as a wet collection of tendrils, wrapping around both its arms. Then another, and another, this time going around its legs and then its neck, all igniting to light with an orange, burning glow that seemed to melt and fizzle away at the beast's flesh. Grunting and then howling, the monster attempted to fight back against these horrific restraints, while more and more of them emerged from the smoke. Then, with one hard yank and pull, the beast was smashed to the ground and slowly dragged backwards into the blurry scenery. It clawed and screamed in anguish, trying to fight back against its elusive captor, but ultimately failed and soon disappeared into the ash and smoke. It continued to scream for a moment, until there was a bright haze of purple light that flashed for only a second. Its screams and roars then ceased, leaving nothing but the eerie sounds of the river water to splash on by. "What was that?" Jada asked with a sense of newfound fear in her voice. Everyone didn't know what to say to what they had just witnessed, but the feeling of being on edge remained at an all-time high. "Stay here," Void gruffed out before retracting his blades and bringing forth his axe once again. Taking a few slow steps forward across the water, the spark scanned the smoke with his mask's visor, but found his sensors to be a tad bugged. Something was affecting its AI in an unseen way. However, Void soon realized that he didn't need it, as a faint, shadowed outline appeared within the sun's lighting cast upon the smoke. The shape started off with no definitive features. It was just a blob that looked to hobble forward in an odd manner. Wincing with a gruff, Void rose his axe up and by his side, watching intently as the unknown shape continued to slowly walk towards him and his family. Approaching up by Void's side, Jida summoned forth a sharp, burning blade from the roof of her hand, ignoring what the spark had asked of her. Then approached Jet, Pofnu, and finally Sarv and Tucker, all prepared to fight by Void's side. Nock and Kot, however, just stood behind, knowing they couldn't fight without the thumper or any other kind of weapon. From behind the blurry figure, soon appeared another to its right, this one looking smaller with a sharp, slender shape dancing from its behind. Then another figure appeared to its left, this one looking taller and lankier than the other two. It was an unknown trio, one that sent Void's protective instincts into complete overdrive. Closer and closer the figures came, with their outlines beginning to take more noticeable shapes, the middle of which looking to be the first of them to walk into the light. The audible sounds of heavy footsteps splashing through the water became louder and louder for all to hear, as the outline shape of the middle figure began to become more noticeable. The outline of that one looked rather fit. That was the best way Void and the rest could describe it. The figure had the outline of a slim upper torso connected to a pair of strong set legs, these of which ended with both feet looking to have 3 clawed toes and a heel dagger-shaped heel spur. As for the arms, they looked bulky with sharp endings that looked to be an armored brace shape. Then there was the head, a head that looked... Before the spark or anyone else could make another estimate to the figure, it finally crossed through to the light, revealing its tall form for all to see. What Void saw suddenly made his eyes widen and his axe to lower. There, walking out and now looking down upon him and his family, was without a shred of a doubt another spark, mask deployed and arm blade ignited at their side. Glowing orange eyes stared back through a similarly designed battle mask, one with gold ridges and visible battle scratches that twinkled in the light. Their body was also vastly different than Void's. It was more humanoid in nature, fit, orange, and bronze with hints of gold and purple, not to mention that they were very tall. They had shiny, pumpkin-shaded hose arms, sharp feet, and humanoid-like 4-fingered hands, and of course, an orange crest on their chest and horns upon their head that looked more sharp than round. Now having a similar reaction to Void, the other spark's eyes widened to seeing another one of their kind. Lowering and retracting their blade, the orange-crested spark took a slight step back in shock as to what they were seeing, in turn, leaving Void to drop his axe completely, something he had never done before. At that moment, Jida and the rest realized it too. They were all looking upon another spark, a living, breathing spark. Then from behind came forth 2 more. The one on the left was a female, tall and fit like the orange one, but had a long sharp tail swaying behind her. 2 massive backwards purple blades protruded from her arms, while a helmet covered her head, leaving a clear lavender glass plate to reveal her face underneath. This appeared to act as some kind of breathing device for the spark. Her white eyes and scarred face squinted for a moment behind the visor, but were suddenly widening with an automated gasp leaving through the speaker below her chin plate.
Bye, Matira.
The right side spark was tall as well and had 4 long, hose-like legs that ended with crab claw-like feet that gave off a threatening aura. He had a color palette of greens, grays, and yellows that created an almost emerald shade upon his form. A double-bladed katana was held tightly within his hands as a battle mask covered his almost oval-shaped, sharp-horned head. Upon seeing Void as well, a set of green eyes beneath the visor widened, whilst he then lowered his blade all the same. Void and his group were silent and in disbelief as to what they had been seeing. 3 sparks, 3 living sparks, stood tall before them all, looking just as shocked as they were. Slowly turning and looking upon each of them, Void's heart began to race and smash against his chest. It couldn't be, he thought. It couldn't be them. They died years ago, he told himself. Taking a small shuffling step forward, Void rose his arms up in a worried gesture, and then retracted his mask to reveal his face to the three before him. He recognized the three's characteristics: the girl's tail, the green's 4 legs, and the center's horn and skin shade, coal gray with amber wood atop it. It couldn't be them, Void repeated on the inside as his mask came up and over. It couldn't be them. Could it? Core? Void quietly asked, causing the center spark's eyes to widen more upon seeing his face and hearing his words. With a slow click, the center spark's gold-tinted battle mask retracted as well, revealing the old, scarred, recognizable face of the brother Void thought he had once lost. Void? Core Novison asked back, as the two brothers stared deeply into each other's eyes in utter disbelief.